There's an interview that has been trending, and this interview was done by Raila Odinga. Raila has continued to attack William Ruto's government over what many now believe that was a rigged election.
I asked this diplomat in Kenya, I said, a situation we saw, the kind of circus we saw at IBC, where 4 commissioners are saying no, 3 commissioners are saying yes, and then you still say that that result is valid. Will this happen in Europe? They told me no, in Europe it will not be accepted.
In this interview, Raila talks about a diplomat he met and talked to, and there are some remarks which that diplomat made, which can only mean that the Europe are not sure about what they want for Africa. So Raila says that in Europe, the kind of mess that was experienced in Kenya happens there, but should that kind of mess happen, then according to that diplomat, that country that is involved is normally suspended from the EU. You know, among the diplomats that Raila Odinga met before going to South Africa, one of them was Jane Marriott. Remember that interview we did about Raila Odinga and Jane Marriott meeting, whereby there was Oparanya and I think there was Junet Mohammed in that meeting. So I suspect that that could have been the diplomat that Raila Odinga is trying to refer to.
In fact, that country would be suspended from being a member of EU. But I said, but in Africa, it is okay. It's not okay in Europe, but in Africa, you can apply different standards. I'm saying as a proud African, that Africa should not be judged by different standards. If this thing is not acceptable in Europe, it should also not be acceptable in Africa. And therefore I'm saying that the facts that are there shows that Mr. William Ruto did not win an election. He lost the elections. I won the elections. So he's there illegally as a president. And what we are going to demand is that Mr. Ruto should resign and let the Kenyans have their will. The areas which they say that people did not vote for me, like in central Kenya, but these results have shown that the people of central Kenya voted for me overwhelmingly.
If European Union can suspend one of their member states because of such a mess that I've seen in Kenya, then I think African Union should also devise a way of dealing with countries that force presidents on citizens, like the case of Rwanda, where the president lifted this age limit, and again like the case of Uganda, where the president also lifted the age limit and is promising to rule forever. So African Union should also go for this kind of leaders and probably suspend it from the African Union. So Raila has continued his onslaught on Biden administration for, according to him, financing and aiding elections of President William Samoei Ruto. This thing, Raila has mentioned it time and time again. Of course, people from Kenya Kwanza have always refuted these claims, but Raila Odinga has persistently mentioned this, that that the Western countries were involved, that the Western countries were involved in the presidential election of Kenya. So Raila talked about this from time and time again. And allow me to introduce a concept here. But there is something that I think could have made the Western countries to probably deny Raila Odinga a chance at the presidency. Why do I believe that the Western people the Western countries probably the US and the UK could have meddled in this election, it is very simple. BRICS. BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS was introduced by the Russian president upon realization that they could come up with a currency that can compete with the dollar. So this BRICS has been something that the US and the UK are not okay with. So if you look at the composition of BRICS countries, whereby there is the South Africa, which enrolled, of course there are countries like Argentina that have shown interest in joining, countries like Iran also showed interest in joining. So the biggest challenge with the US here is that they knew that if Raila Odinga became the president, then probably Raila Odinga would lead Kenya into BRICS. Because if you look at Cyril Ramaphosa, President Cyril Ramaphosa is one of the best presidents, one of the best friends of Raila Odinga, and Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of South Africa. And because Cyril Ramaphosa sided with the BRICS, so it was evident that US and the UK realized that if they allowed Raila Odinga to become the president, then probably Raila would lead Kenya into BRICS faction. Because so now countries are joining BRICS, and if Kenya was to join BRICS, then that would mean dollar would continue being weak. So this is what the US are not okay with, because should the Russian people force or execute this plan of buying oil using BRICS, then that means dollar will be weak.
So I want to thank them for their patriotic duty. What happened is not the mistake. Their will was subverted by agents of impunity at Bomas of Kenya. Now I've said that the people of Kenya expressed their will through these elections. Those who are resident in the country voted for me overwhelmingly. Secondly, the Kenyans who live in diaspora, in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, particularly in Southern Africa, turned up and voted. And the diaspora vote, although it was not as huge as would have been expected, but it was majority in my favor. So I want to thank them for turning up and voting for me in those elections. I want to thank them very much, and I tell them that their vote did not go in vain. When we form a government, we will definitely work together with them.
Yes, dear viewers, that interview full of a lot of insights, and in the interview, Raila Odinga is blaming the West. And Raila Odinga, in that interview again, is telling the Kikuyu community that thanks for giving me 2 million votes. So he thanked the Kikuyu community for voting for him around 2 million votes. He also thanked the diaspora community and a lot of other people for the good job that they did. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly share your opinions below the comment section. Once again, I'd like to urge you to stay safe and stay blessed until we catch up again in our next analysis.